Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. This is Brock Beard from LastCar.info coming at you from the conclusion of the Ambetter 301 at the New Hampshire Motor Speedway, where unofficially Christopher Bell has scored his second career Cup Series victory, his first since last year at the Daytona Infield Road Course, and a tremendous victory there over Chase Elliott. Elliott seemed to have the most aggressive car at the end. However, Truex had the most dominant car, and in a battle between a couple of drivers, between Truex and Bell, of course, being teammates and also drivers trying to get their first win of the season and assure themselves, at least so far, a spot in the playoffs. We now have 14 different winners in the first part of the season, and we have two drivers that are only in the winless positions. Kevin Harvick currently out of the top 16 in points as a result of this shuffle, despite a fine run for portions of the race today, and an interesting scenario. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in here tonight. We'll talk more about the Cup Series race, the Xfinity Series event as well, and we'll talk about the last car battle in the Cup Series case. It was settled quite quickly, but that'll be one to certainly talk about here. Certainly in our own little my own fantasy competition with Lastbro. I picked Christopher Bell on Thursday for the win, so fingers crossed on technical inspection, of course, because that certainly became a massive issue in Saturday's Xfinity Series race, and we'll be talking about that as well. But again, Christopher Bell, very much a standout at this particular track at New Hampshire. Last year, in the closing stages of a race that was shortened by darkness, and Eric Almirola took the victory. Bell was tracking him down at the finish, ultimately couldn't get around him in time. And before that, when he was driving the number 95 car for the Levine family team, had a good run, was running about the top five in the latter stages of it, had some misfortune in the closing laps that dropped him outside the top 20. But in this particular case, no misfortune, at least during the race, to be had, and pulling off the victory. Pretty competitive race. Definitely a lot to talk about, not just on the driver's side, but also on the broadcast side, with the conspicuous absence of Rick Allen in the broadcast booth. I definitely want to kind of talk about that today as well. But first of all, we'll kind of go through the rest of the first part of the running order here. Christopher Bell, your race winner by 5.767 seconds over Chase Elliott. Third spot for Bubba Wallace. I know there's a lot of discussion on Twitter already if this is a career run for Bubba Wallace. I think that was already mentioned with his Kansas run earlier. I think he overcame much more adversity in that one, personally, and for a much longer race there. But regardless, a fine showing for him. Talking with Lastbro about this during the week, I think that, Bubba, it tends to be really good at the super speedways for sure, especially, of course, with his first victory at Talladega. But it seems like he also has a real advantage at these flat tracks, rather. We saw a little bit out of him at Martinsville, when he had the 43 car a couple of years ago, the race that was in June. That was like a Wednesday night race. He was battling Jimmy Johnson for a top 10 finish, and I believe did really well in the stages that night. Had a top 5 in Indianapolis. He was good in the spring race at Phoenix last year. Unfortunately, got the last place run in the fall race, but no real fault of his own in that one. And then having a fine showing today in this New Hampshire race. I think he's really developing a good flat track program from one program to the other, from Petty Enterprises or the Richard Petty Motorsports team to now 2311 Racing. So a good shot for him. Martin Truex Jr. had an utterly dominant car. Looked like he was surely on his way to his first win in New Hampshire. It was definitely a fixture on that. It was surprised that he hadn't won the race yet. Again, as I mentioned on Twitter, I thought for sure in my mind's eye I could imagine he had raised the lobster in victory lane once at least. But still eluding him. I believe that's his 28th or 29th start here at New Hampshire in his career. So still not a victory for him. He's won at Dover before a couple of times, but still not at New Hampshire. Kevin Harvick rounding out the top 5. Very surprised that he got a top 5 out of this. Not the fact that, of course, he's very good at this track, but the incident that he had on pit road with Austin Dillon, situation where it looked like he was going to have some damage to the right front of his car, and specifically that toe link that has been so much of an issue. We talk about it every week on this show, and they talk about it on the broadcasts. Somehow, thankfully, in his case, did not come to pass. At least, I don't know if they're just making the toe links out of more durable stuff. But a good run out of him in the 5th spot there. Denny Hamlin in 6th. Brad Keselowski mentioning the Austin Dillon thing, a bizarre bit of circumstances there where Dillon seemed to have some kind of an issue with Keselowski and came up into him there on the back straightaway about halfway through the race. and Keselowski then chasing him down to the apron and going into turn 3 under caution. Not exactly sure what the scuffle was there, but Keselowski, who was very good in this race last year, in his last start at this track for the Penske team, driving that Freightliner scheme, had a good finish on this one. 7th place finish there is solid, especially for how much that team's gone through, in particular his team. So it's good to see. Ross Chastain, didn't see much out of him in this race. They tried to kind of focus on whenever he was near Denny Hamlin for most of this race, but kind of had a more or less quiet 8th place finish, just ahead of his teammate Daniel Suarez in 9th. And Kurt Busch, after taking on tires at the end of the race, anticipating perhaps a late race caution that ultimately did not come to pass, Busch ends up past William Byron by 1.4 seconds and takes the 10th spot there. So some good runs for a lot of drivers. Good to see a lot of comers and goers in this. I was worried after what we had at Martinsville earlier this year that the flat track performance of the next gen car was going to be an issue in this event as well, but certainly wasn't the case. I thought even with the long green flag runs, I thought it was compelling enough to actually track who was able to work their way up there. And also drivers able to come back from a lot of adversity. Kyle Busch finishing in the 12th spot, I know, is not really what he was looking for. But given all the struggles he had, it looked like he was well on his way to being, well out of the top 30 with how often he was spinning out and dropping to the back, at least making sure not to wreck his car during any of these incidents. And 2 of those incidents in particular seemed to just be completely by himself, just overdriving the car or something just wasn't hooked up right. But finishing in the 12th spot on the lead lap with such a dominant performance as Truex had at the beginning and Christopher Bell at the end, I think that's still a fine recovery for him there, even in a year that's been a little bit lackluster. And I think it's been certainly a distraction with the ongoing stories of what's going to happen with him next year. What is where is he staying with sponsors for next season? A lot of things up in the air, but not too much of a step backwards, especially going into Pocono, where after some initial struggles when he was driving for Gibbs, he's always seemed to be a factor at those races there. And we'll see if he can keep that going next weekend. Austin Cindric right behind him in the 13th spot, and Kyle Larson, the first car a lap down, in 14th. Definitely not the kind of run they were looking for, especially with Chase Elliott running as well as he did. We'll certainly talk about the last place battle here in this one. In the Cup Series race, at least pending post-race inspection, BJ McLeod has now ended up with his 4th last place finish of the 2022 season, his 2nd in a row, following a toe link problem at the Atlanta race after an incident in that one. This after just 4 laps of the race, a tangle off of turn 2, very similar to what we had in the Xfinity Series race yesterday, where a simple 2-car incident where a car slides up perpendicular to the track, and that narrows the surface up quite a bit. A lot of drivers that are committed to the outside lane already thinking about running against the wall coming off that corner. Unfortunately, Alex Bowman and BJ McLeod were in that situation, ran into each other coming off that corner. Josh Bilicki lost control, slid into that wreck as well, and ended up being a very big mess, at least for those drivers there. BJ McLeod and Alex Bowman's cars were towed to the garage area, it looks like from the rear entrance to the garage. Big thanks to the folks, No Tires Just Gas here on the, that usually is on the show tonight. I'm not sure if you're in the chat room here tonight, but definitely say hey if you are. Sent some pictures from the Xfinity race yesterday, and also got some other great pictures from the race as well. So I was able to kind of share those along the same path here. Mike Dutton on Twitter there, thank you for his pictures as well, showing what was happening. Ty Dillon as well as Josh Bilicki were able to make it to pit road. It seems like both of them crossed the stripe in the process, so they were shown a lap ahead. That ended up dropping BJ to last place, where Bilicki had originally held the spot before then. That ended up proving decisive because both the 42 and the 77 were soon pushed behind the wall. The 42 car actually needed a tow to get to the garage area, and all 4 of them were out of the race. Not the earliest that we've seen a driver fall out of a race in New Hampshire. As I mentioned on Twitter, in 2002, Jeff Bodine was driving a backup Travis Carter car back when Todd Bodine was driving the number 26 Discover Card car back in 2002. And what seemed to be a start and park, although I'm not sure if it was a legitimate mechanical issue, rear end issues there put the number 66 behind the wall, and Jeffrey Bodine wasn't able to complete a single lap of that race. The only time that's happened in a Cup Series race at New Hampshire. I believe a Jeff Green had a race where he only completed 2 laps and had an incident very early in the race as well. That was the second fewest laps. I think it was about 2006, 2007 when he was driving for the Haas entry. But this one here is now a three-way tie for the third fewest laps. A couple of other incidents. It would believe it was J.J. Yaley in 2012 for the America-Israel team, as well as Ward Burton in 2007 when he was having an awful season for Morgan McClure Motorsports. Both of them were out of the race after 4 laps, just like BJ was today. An unfortunate situation there. It looked like they were having a lot of great brand activation with this ice cream company that was on board for the number 78 this weekend. There was some video they were posting on the Live Fast Motorsports team where they were handing out samples to kids in the infield there. And that was good to see. It kind of reminded me of back at Las Vegas last year where J.G. Yaley had the Fat Boy ice cream sandwiches one, and he was tossing them to fans up in the infield there. And he was able to, he handed me one of those too, which was fantastic because it was very warm out that evening. But it just shows how important brand activation is at these races. Even if you don't get the best finish out there, I think definitely got some good, got some exposure for the brand out there. And hopefully they'll be able to keep going with the 78 team because they just need the luck at this point. It looks all but certain. At this point, he has now a 2-finish lead over Corey LaJoie for the most last place finishes this season. Does that mean he's going to have a certificate or not this fall at Phoenix? We're going to find out one way or the other. Interesting thing with that is LaJoie was actually leading the last car standings coming into the Atlanta race last week. Had a tiebreaker over BJ McLeod. And then, of course, he had that fantastic run at the end of the race there, nearly claiming the victory. BJ, of course, since then, getting the last place finishes in these 2 races, has now changed that championship quite a bit. So unfortunate to see the 78 car out, especially in these races where we're just having the 36 chartered entries out there. I think that's been definitely a different scenario for those guys. But hopefully we'll see things kind of change around for that program. It just sounds like BJ is just frustrated on the radio. And I'm not sure what's going to turn it around. I think the problem with racing is you got just one race after the other. And if you're having bad luck at one point or another, and it just seems to just kind of compound. But hopefully things will kind of turn around for him in that program. Another thing I want to certainly talk about that was very big in this particular race was a bit of a change in the broadcast lineup. I still haven't heard firmly what was going on with Rick Allen. I heard somebody else mentioning it on Twitter that there was that I guess Rick Allen wasn't here for another New Hampshire broadcast earlier. I seem to remember that was one where they switched him around and they put him on pit road. They were kind of experimenting with things. I haven't heard. I still haven't really kind of heard the clear story on that. If you guys have, go ahead and certainly mention it in the chats here tonight. But obviously, if it's anything serious, I certainly hope it isn't. But if it is, I certainly certainly pulling for the guy. But I do have to say at the same time, again, completely separate and distinct from that, I have to certainly critique the way the broadcast played out with the remaining crew that they had, where Dale Jr. was basically in the main play-by-play slot, and you had Jeff Burton and Steve Letarte there. I have to say, at the very beginning of the broadcast, it didn't feel significantly different from when Rick Allen was in the booth. And I think again, that kind of symbolizes, to me at least, that, again, he doesn't seem to really have a firm presence in the booth. He doesn't have that one where, you could tell, even if you don't know anything about the sport and you're listening to the broadcast, from like the delivery and like the way that they sound or what they're describing, and that they're the one that's kind of painting the picture in the way that a Eli Gold or a Bob Jenkins or a Mike Joy or somebody like that would do. And I felt like him not being there didn't change that a lot in and of itself. Because again, I think that in a lot of these past broadcasts, Dale Jr., Jeff Burton, and Steve Letarte are all clamoring with him to do the play-by-play. So this just sounded like it was less chaotic, because now you still have everybody trying to do the play-by-play, but now at least it's just 3 of them. One thing I thought was kind of interesting is that, and I don't know how much of this has happened when Rick was in the booth, but it sounded like Marty Snyder on pit road was trying to do a lot of the commentary himself and trying to do a lot of the play-by-play, and then it almost felt like we were getting back to having 4 people doing the play-by-play. But somehow, like, the more the race went on, the less that bothered me. I don't know if because again, the pit reporters, I'm listening to some of these older broadcasts, and really the pit reporters have a valuable insight to be able to bring a lot of these stories up, from from pit road that the main broadcasters can't track, and I think that that's still helpful. And it's interesting is to hear, like, even in Bob Jenkins again doing the same thing with ESPN, even with his, I think, is really the gold standard. Very much depended on when they had John Kernan, Dr. Jerry Punch, and Bill Weber on pit road, among others. Ray Dunlap and others, came later on there. I think that they played off each other very well. So I think they do play hand in hand with the play-by-play. But again, I think having that firm hand on the wheel with the play-by-play is so critical with this. And I think, especially nowadays, where you're trying to make these bite-sized videos to really promote the sport, and you're trying to, like, you do these radioactive segments on the weekly shows. You notice a lot of those use the radio broadcast instead of the TV broadcast, which I know a lot of people see in my broadcast problems videos, just say, like, look, why don't you just listen to the radio? It's like, that should be a red flag still. There should be great moments in the play-by-play that make you want to pull this moment out and play that audio in the background and get people really excited. It's like, oh yeah, that quote and that moment fit together really well. I didn't sense from Junior's play-by-play that we were necessarily getting those moments. I just think that a lot of the improvement, again, was from the fewer people in the booth. I think that was a lot better. And, and again, when it wasn't, and again, I don't think Marty Snyder was as persistent of a presence in there, but when he was, I felt like that was a little bit too much going on again. But when he kind of throttled back a little bit on that, and you just had the main three guys in the booth, they seemed like they were doing okay. I still think, and again, I like Junior and I like what he's doing with the podcast, and I think he's fantastic for the sport. So I certainly don't mean any disrespect by this. And I know people always, roll their eyes when you say "but" after something like that. But I think the issue is he still doesn't have. There's an it factor there. There's an it factor that just makes you, again, that thing you listen to with, like, a famous play-by-play. Think Jim McKay, think Howard Cosell. Other sports, doesn't even have to be in racing like that. People like that. There wasn't a moment in this where I would hear it and be like, ooh, like, that was a good moment. The one I always think of is, even though he wasn't always the play-by-play guy, was when Dr. Jerry Punch called the finish of Dale Earnhardt's last win at Talladega, and bringing up that he went from 18th spot to the lead in 6 laps, and he, calling him Mr. Restrictor Plate, having these little moments. There's a thing where I think, again, it's this conversational style in the booth, which was still there. I mean, I think in terms of the chemistry, I think we're getting closer to that. It felt like the three of them were just kind of friends, on the couch and kind of talking about it. And that's a big part of it. I think there's a lot of booth combinations that don't even have that chemistry. I remember times that NBC had it with, where it seemed like Bill Weber and Wally Dallenbach were kind of at each other a little bit. And then Benny Parsons is trying to kind of keep them together a little bit. Although I think Bill Weber gets still too much grief for the time that he was doing that. But again, it didn't click as well as maybe some of these other, groups that they had. There wasn't really a moment, even in this race here, and there were moments that they certainly could have brought it up, that to maybe really hammer home Martin Truex not winning at New Hampshire and what this track means to him and means to his family, something like that. Or Christopher Bell trying to get the win, and how close he'd come, and bring up his run with Levine family team. And they talked about his Busch Series wins here. It's like, okay, that's a good start, but a little bit more of that. It's easier said than done. It's certainly easier said than done. And I think it would be a lot to suggest that, to expect that Junior would do this right from the start, having not necessarily been in this position that many times, at least as the main guy, where Rick would kind of, hold that off. But yeah, it's not, yeah. And RD Fox, I see your comment on it too. I think that's different. He doesn't have, it's not the voice. It's not the voice that you would hear and it would have it. And that's where I think I would like to believe, maybe with Rick Allen, maybe just some different coaching or a different producer in his ear or a different director or somebody else could just work with him there and bring him back to kind of where he was when he was doing the Truck Series broadcasts. And he was really engaged. And again, when you have that one guy with a firm hand on the wheel, what I always like with those is they have a presence that the other people in the booth respect. And what happens then is that they would add to what that main play-by-play guy is saying. They wouldn't distract from it. or they wouldn't just have their own conversation, or they wouldn't turn it into a conversation. There was a dynamic that kept it where it was something like that. And that I don't feel like Junior had that in this broadcast. And that's where I was kind of starting to wonder. It's like, okay, I do think he improved on it. I thought he was getting more comfortable. I really felt like he was kind of out of his element at the beginning. And I was like, oh boy, here we go. Although at the beginning of it, again, I thought I really didn't notice hardly that Rick Allen wasn't there, because it did seem to go a lot smoother. And I never thought like, oh, something's missing. But then the later the broadcast went, it's like, well, we still don't have it. It's too bad you can't just get that attribute of Rick Allen and put it in one of these three guys there. I just think that's I think that's something either you have or you don't. I don't know. I mean, I was saying something about like, maybe if you could do something with training, but I'm not sure how much training you could really do to really make that happen. Sometimes as Bob Jenkins described it, it's just magic. So, and Bob just described himself as a race fan that got lucky. Sir Murray Walker was the same thing in Formula One. He just described what he saw. But of course, you listen to the way that Sir Walker did it, and my goodness, these are iconic calls. You hear certain drivers' names only in that person's voice. That's what needs to happen. And I don't know who could do that. I think that should be the real star search that these networks go for. I think NBC certainly needs to do that. And Fox should probably consider it at some point. I mean, I love Mike Joy. I think he does a fantastic job. And, I always recoil when people are trying to rush somebody out the door on something here. But, I just think that the situation is that, the person can't do it forever. And when that time comes, I think there should be somebody waiting in the wings. Kind of like, again, much like with, like when Ryan Seacrest came in to help Dick Clark with New Year's Eve. I mean, you have somebody that becomes so, synonymous with what they do that you can't possibly imagine somebody else doing it. Or if you do, you think of somebody that was equally great in another time period. I think Mike Joy is certainly in that category. I've never really felt that with Rick Allen, and I certainly don't feel it with like Adam Alexander and Vince Welch in there. And I've already said plenty about that in the other video there. But I'm glad that they're willing to experiment. I'm glad that they're not so intractable with their booth, that they're just going to have, okay, we're going to have these four people. It's the same people that we had since 2015 or 2016 or whatever it was. And they're just going to keep doing it over and over again and not fix anything else there. Now, it could just be a coincidence. I'm seeing some comments here that maybe he had a track and field event that he was going to. That's good to see, but yeah. But that's what they need. There needs to be something like that. And again, I think it's unfortunate because you probably need to find somebody that just needs to fill that role, because otherwise it's going to feel incomplete. This felt incomplete. During the race, I was imagining, we get to the playoffs and things are really critical to moments of the championship that you really need to pause. Like maybe somebody has a mechanical failure after their entire season and, drops them out of the race. And this is like a big moment. This person's going to be eliminated, or he's in a must-win situation. Like you need to call that perfectly. You need to recognize, isn't that, okay, well, he's out of the race, moving on to this. It's like, no. You need to stop, slow things down a little bit, and really kind of spell that out. I'm not sure if this booth would have been able to do that as it stands. I'd like to believe they would rise to that occasion. I just don't think that this particular group would be able to do that. And maybe, and again, do I think that effort is helped when Rick Allen is in there? Not really. I think that there's some calls. I mean, I liked what Rick Allen did with Jimmy Johnson's call for the championship. When he won his 7th championship, that was good. I mean, sometimes he can get there. It's just, it's exceptional. It's not the norm. And it's not something that typically keeps going when, there's anything else that's happening that's critical for the championship too. So that's something I hope that they still work on. And I hope that, we'll see what's happening there. But that would be kind of interesting to find out. It's worlds apart from doing a show. Again, I think that a lot of the approaches that you see with modern NASCAR broadcasting, excluding the radio, because I think the radio still has some of that basic element where they feel they have to paint the picture in your mind. And so that's why most people still listen to it. But I think on TV, there's been a little bit of a dilution there where everything is now treated as like a weekly show, where they're just popping off about things that are happening and they're trying to relate it to what is being shown on screen. There's not that curiosity of what's happening on the track and just keeping that self-contained and trying to bring it up. I brought up at one point that I liked that when Dale Jr. brought up the Robbie Gordon and Michael Waltrip situation in New Hampshire. That was great. And I know that Mike Joy brings up historical events in the Fox booth, but what I've really disliked about Fox lately is that a lot of the other commentators, especially Clint Boyer, I thought, frankly, becomes quite rude with the way that Mike Joy would bring these stories up and say, like, oh, only you would know that, or something kind of dismissive like that. And I know Clint's not, I don't sense that he's doing it with any ill intent. I think he's just trying to be funny and trying to keep things light and but I think that's a little disrespectful, and I've really kind of had a problem with that. And I think I think maybe there's been other cases where Mike hasn't been able to bring up as many stories with what's happened, maybe because of that, or maybe just kind of being put in that situation. On NBC, I don't sense there really is an attempt to really bring up something that happened from last week or a couple months ago or a couple years ago. That's something I think that Rick really should have had the role of doing and saying, like, remember in this race last year and Denny Hamlin was trying to get the win, or remember in this championship he won 9 races and came so close to getting in the championship. You're talking about Harvick, for example. Those are moments that that need to be there too. And it was refreshing to hear Junior, even if it was a very, very brief moment, and just saying, this reminds me of this. It's like, it seems like there's so little of that now, on the NBC side. And really, yeah, I felt that there's not been as much of it from even the Fox side of it too. It's become less common. But on the NBC side, it's practically non-existent. So hopefully that's turning around a bit, and maybe we can get that there, especially with Junior being such a student of the sport's history. But I think that's where that's going. So again, I'm glad that NBC is trying to experiment with different things. I don't know if that was their intent, if Rick just wasn't available for this for reasons outside of it. But I think it was a worthwhile experiment. I think that if the opportunity comes to do another experiment like this, I'd like to see one with Steve Letarte kind of being in the main play-by-play role, because I sense, again, if nothing else, he has the loudest voice, and I think a bit closer to the kind of the Columbia School of Broadcasting kind of tone to it. I still think he's still kind of missing that, that more, again, a Bob Jenkins, Eli Gold kind of thing, where it's, welcome, ladies and gentlemen. Like, I can't picture him doing that. I think he's less, I think he's more non-assuming than that. I think he's just much more nuts and bolts, literally, from his pit crew work. That's where I think he'd actually be better on pit road, where you have to have somebody that's very loud so you can actually hear somebody among all the noises. Again, Matt Yoakum in the same thing. I think that he does a great job on pit road from what he does on the Superstar Racing Experience, and then Marty Snyder, of course, on the Cup Series side. I think he would fit in great with that dynamic. I would put him there. Jeff Burton, I'd probably keep him on weekly shows. I'm not sure if he, works into the booth dynamic, because I think he comes off as a little bit of a third wheel now in this dynamic. I felt that Junior and Steve Letarte kind of bounce things off each other a bit more, and you could probably do it with just the two of them. But I'm not sure. But I don't know. I would scramble things up significantly. I think that would probably be, the more I'm thinking about this, I would probably do that. I'd keep Junior in the booth. I think he's more than asserted himself as having that role in bringing up, again, the history of the sport, being kind of the Benny Parsons to react when something's on the track. I think he's watching the track better than the other two and responding to things when they happen. I think that's important. We saw a little bit of that even with Willie T. Ribbs in the Superstar Racing Experience race yesterday, where he's reacting to things that are happening. And, again, I think Alan Bestwick played off him there pretty well. But I would put him there. I would put Jeff Burton maybe on one of the weekly shows and doing something like that, maybe like what Bobby Labonte was doing, kind of rotate him into that. I would put Steve Letarte on pit road. I'd have him be one of the pit road reporters with Snyder and those guys. I think he'd have more fun doing it because he has that connection, and he probably still knows a lot of the guys that are on pit road. I think he'd have a better rapport with some of these guys and get some more interesting commentary, much like Larry McReynolds was doing Although even Larry McReynolds, of course, was in the booth, so I guess that's a little different. But I'd like to try him on pit road. I think that would be really good to see. So at that point, you have two spots open there. Again, I think one of them is definitely for your main play-by-play guy. I would like somebody and I've seen a lot of mentions of it already. Would be Alan Bestwick for sure. Alan, I think, is gold left on the ground there. I mean, he's done just as great commentary for the Superstar Racing Experience as anything else. He's a really underused talent. He's had that history with NBC. I think that would be great. I think you need to get him or somebody of that caliber in there. And I think NBC had that. They had that back in 2001 when they were going face to face with, I mean, the Fox group was like the big group back then when you had, Mike Joy and Darrell Waltrip and Larry McReynolds, and they instantly hit it off. I mean, there's still a lot of people like half my age where that is their gold standard, and that's like what their favorite group. Certainly from like those first 5 years, especially of their contract there. I think that was the best that Fox had. And they're really looking to kind of recapture that. And I think it's just been really challenging. But NBC needs to have like somebody like that, and then a third commentator guy. I think you probably need somebody that's just a bit quieter. I think you need somebody that's going to be more in the Ned Jarrett role. I think Junior kind of fits. It's blurred the line a little bit. I used to think of more in the Ned Jarrett role. Now I'm thinking of more of the Benny Parsons kind of role. I'm not saying that's the one size fits all, but I think that it's worth looking at what worked great and saying that that's where the starting point should be. Get Alan Bestwick, get Dale Jr., and somebody else. Just somebody else. I don't know who else that would be. I mean, you could get. I think Brad Daugherty probably would be good. I think Wally Dallenbach might be good. Heck, I don't know. I mean, somebody like that maybe. I don't know. I'm maybe Dallenbach or Daugherty. I'm thinking almost somebody that's a bit quieter. Because I really like where Brad Daugherty is now with him and Dale Jarrett in that other booth. I think that they're doing a really good job and kind of summing up at different stages of the race. I'm really glad that they're still on the payroll there and doing that. You almost need like somebody else that's like just looking at the stats or, maybe looking at a more analytical side of it, and where it's not so much the play-by-play and it's not so much the color commentary, but it's something kind of in between. And again, it would have to be kind of a Ned Jarrett figure where, maybe it is somebody that maybe has more of that pit road experience, and more of that. I think Steve Letarte is trying to fit that role, but again, he's got such a good voice. He's got a very loud voice and very, active, kind of go-getter kind of personality. I think that fits better on pit road than the booth. I think you need, I don't know, maybe somebody a bit older, maybe. I'm not sure about that. I'm not sure who that would be. I think that's the big question there. I think you could fit. It would have to be somebody that would work well with Junior and Bestwick, and I'm not sure who would be the halfway point there. I'm not sure about that. Some guys don't like Wally Dallenbach. I liked Wally Dallenbach. I think that was fine. No, not Danica Patrick. No, I don't think that would work. Again, somebody. Again, a little like maybe more like an elder statesman, but not real. Again, the not loud aspect of it. I think Ned Jarrett had like these great calls, but it was always in support of the play-by-play, and it kind of bridged the gap if there was much of one between like a Bob Jenkins and a Benny Parsons. That's the part that I think is interesting. So yeah, that would be kind of interesting, but maybe Kyle Petty. I think Kyle Petty might actually not be bad. I think he would, again, somebody that's a bit older, somebody that's, again, going a bit further in the sport, because you got Junior that's representing more recent drivers, and, and having that, somebody like that. I kind of like that. I'm kind of picturing that a bit. Like if you had Kyle Petty in there, because I really liked what he did with the broadcast, where he kind of balanced, the commentary with, with that. And Dale Jarrett mentioning on there, I maybe consider Dale Jarrett, but I like what he's doing with Brad Daugherty. I think he balances him well in that section there. Phil Parsons, could be, yeah. If Phil Parsons doing Cup would be interesting, given the Truck Series one. Kenny Wallace is a little too loud. I'm not sure about him. I'm not sure if that would work, but I like Kenny Wallace. I like Kenny Wallace doing the race day thing. I think they should bring the race day stage back. And you gotta have him in there. You gotta have, if you're gonna have somebody with high energy. You can put somebody like, you put Kenny Wallace, I would put Steve Letarte there too. I mean, make him work that too. And a third guy, I don't even know. You got to have a John Roberts type or something to kind of tie it all together or something like that. But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I don't think, again, I don't. I liked when you had Wally, when you had getting things all crossed up. When you had Larry McReynolds in the booth for Fox, but I don't think you have to have a crew chief being your big three. I think that worked really well for Fox. I mean, you could have somebody that's maybe in a different role than that. Like but just something completely different. But yeah, I didn't mind. Schrader, yeah, that'd be interesting. Spencer, yeah, I don't know. I mean, something like that. That would be cool. But yeah, somebody like a Dr. Dick Bergeron type. I mean, I know Dick Bergeron did a lot of pit road stuff as well as the play-by-play. So he kind of went back and forth there, and that's again, that's the same kind of experimentation that happens from one to the other. But that would be something I think would be interesting to see. Yeah, I'm with you, Alexander. I think Kenny Wallace would be too close to Boyer. I'm looking just less noise. I want less noise and more content and a little bit more dressed down, a little bit more professional. I think that's where it has to start at the top with like an Alan Bestwick or somebody real damn close to it. I think it's going to have to be up to that level. Keep Junior in there because you got the eyes on it. Most popular driver, for Pete's sake, put him in there. It'd be silly not to. And then find somebody that balances the other two out. That's what you need. It can't be too much. It can't be more of Allen or Junior. It has to be something completely different, and that's where it has to be kind of a situation. So, yeah, hopefully they're working on it. I think that would be fun to see. Try out Dave Moody. Why not? No, I don't think so. I think that's he's got a good spot already with his radio work. Dave Despain. Yeah, maybe. Dave is again, somebody like that. I know Dave's probably retired at this point from what I hear, but I think that would be something else to do. So I don't know. I would kind of move things around. Terry Labonte, yeah, maybe. I like Bobby Labonte. I think we talked about this last week on the show. I think Bobby really, I never heard him so animated as he was after that Superstar Racing Experience thing. I thought that was really cool to hear, and I think that's great with him. No, I wouldn't. Yeah, I wouldn't bring in Ed Moody or any of those radio guys. I think the radio guys need to just stick to radio and just do their thing. Unless they get to be the main play-by-play guy, I think that's the only spot that they could really laterally transfer into. I think having them as a color commentator is again too many cooks in the kitchen. I like the Watkins Glen broadcast where they bring in Bagman or those guys out there. I think it's fun, but I don't think it's something for every week. I don't think it really works. I think you need to have a big three and hopefully stick to that and keep that going. And NBC's not there yet. They haven't been there, for years. I thought their 2001 group. I thought when they had Benny Parsons, Wally Dallenbach, and Alan Bestwick, I thought that was fine. I think it wasn't quite as good as the Fox group back then, at least in those first couple of years, but it was right in there. And I thought Alan was every bit the equal of Mike Joy, certainly with both their combined radio experience and play-by-play and everything else there. So that's where it needs to be different. So leaned on that quite a bit. I'm sure I lost a lot of viewers on that. It's turned into broadcast chat pretty quickly, but I thought that would be a big part of the show here tonight, and it certainly ended up being the case here as well. Let's see here. Yeah, actually got another message here asking if asking where Rick Allen was today. Yeah, I mean, yeah. Hopefully, it's something benign, like I'm hearing from these other discussions, but we'll go from there. Let's talk about the Xfinity Series race. We'll do trivia here a little bit later in the show, and I don't have anything for show and tell here this week, but we'll have something coming along the ways here. But we'll certainly talk about the Xfinity Series race because that ended up being very significant in terms of the last car battle here. Poor Julia Landauer, first of all. I thought it was a great storyline of her getting back out into the Xfinity Series, getting this ride with Alpha Prime, and having a good run out there. I thought it was classy by Justin Allgaier to mention it even after he'd won the race, and was certainly looking to just celebrate the victory there. It was unfortunate the two of them came together. Landauer didn't need to be hugging the wall completely. That was the same thing that the spotter and the team was telling her even when the wreck happened. She was doing her best to keep clear of Allgaier at the time. but I don't think she was wandering in any unusual spot there. It's just unfortunate. I think it was just a case where Algar was overdriving his car, trying to stay ahead of William Byron. The couple of these cars just came together, and unfortunately, Landauer came out on the wrong side of that. I will give major props to the Alpha Prime team for getting the car back out there. I thought that was tremendous. I think it was unfortunate that she had to just run at a reduced pace at that point, but it ended up back in the order at the same time. JJ Yaley had an issue with the throttle body or the air cleaner. That case seemed like he was well off the pace at the beginning of the race. Akinori Ogata, after the radio issues, his teammate, the number 13 car, was kind of staying right with him. And Ogata seemed like he was having even bigger problems than the 66 was. So it was surprising to see both of them drop off the pace quite as quickly as they did. Long was very exercised on the radio. Carl Long was, to make sure that the radio was working. I still never really heard Ogata on the radio during the race, but apparently Carl did. I don't know if they just kind of went with it or if it actually worked and it just heard him on a different channel. I assume that's what was happening. Of course, he ended up having an engine issue there that dropped him out, and he finished in the 25th spot at the end of that race. But what it looked like it was going to be Landauer out of the race and being your last place finisher, finishing last in her first NASCAR Xfinity Series start. Got most of that article done. One part of it is I was writing about, how much of a close call Landon Castle had trying to get his first career win. He's been not just trying to not forget his parking pass each week, but also get some top 5 runs along the way. His runs at Martinsville, where he was very good. I believe at Atlanta he was up there. And then coming out in this race here was a contender for the win, led 17 laps. Unfortunately got passed towards the end of it. But then actually ultimately I guess it was a blessing in disguise when post-race inspection came through and they found out that his car was too low in the rear and Noah Gragson's car was too low in the front. Both of these drivers disqualified from the race after finishing in the top 5 positions and classified in the last 2 spots. So all of a sudden, it became a Noah Gragson article. Gragson was nearly disqualified at Darlington, you may recall, last year. I believe it was also for failing post-race heights, if I remember correctly. But ultimately, that one was overturned, and Matt Mills inherited last place midway through the week, so we had a very late last change on that. But according to JR Motorsports, when they tweeted after the race was over that they were decided not to challenge the technical infraction or the penalty there. So Gragson already being ranked behind Castle. Whatever Castle does, I'm not sure if they're choosing to overturn theirs or not. But with Gragson, they're not pursuing that. So Gragson has secured the last place finish there. First time with multiple drivers in a Cup Series or a NASCAR Top 3 Series race that have been classified out of the race by disqualification since 1960. In the first World 600 at the Charlotte Motor Speedway, 6 drivers, including both the Petties, both Richard and Lee, were docked by NASCAR for cutting the entrance of pit road at Charlotte. Back then, when the track was thrown together, it didn't have a very clean entrance to pit road. It was at a weird angle, and it was actually easier for drivers to cut that corner off. And NASCAR had a drivers' meeting that was warning these drivers to say, look, if you cut this entrance, we're going to disqualify you. And unfortunately, even when that happened, you had a 60-car field that ultimately only had 54 of them scored because 6 drivers were disqualified from the race. And it got Junior Johnson, it got both the Petties, and it got Lenny Page, who was the last place finisher. And there's another competitor in there. I'm trying to remember who the other competitor was. I think it was Ken Rush, but another competitor at the back of the field there. All of them caught up by that. So a very different situation here where it was an actual mechanical situation, but very unusual. The other exception to this, of course, is in 2017, there were a total of 3 different drivers that were disqualified from the dual races at Daytona, including 2 of them in dual race, I believe number 1, Martin Truex and Chris Buescher. A.J. Allmendinger was then disqualified from race 2, all of them for failing post-race heights and out of that. And what was interesting is actually I wrote that article in 2017, and I believe Reed Sorensen and Timmy Hill were the last place finishers, and I didn't update that. I didn't even know that had even those disqualifications had been handed down until that November. Can't really explain why, honestly. It was just when I was doing my season review article, I suddenly noticed that. I'm like, wait a minute, how did this happen? So the stats updated, but unfortunately the article is, still the article. I mean, at this point it was, it was caught much later at that point. But Still in that one, even though there were points for the top 10 finishers, not a full points race. So depending on which way you want to look at it, I know it got posted on Reddit, so I'm glad there was a bit more of discussion about it there. But yes, strictly speaking, in a NASCAR points paying race in the top 3 series where everybody gets points, it hasn't happened for multiple disqualifications since 1960, and it's never happened in the Xfinity series. That I could definitely guarantee, because I was looking at that and seeing these other drivers that were disqualified, and each one of those were just one-offs back then. In fact, Jeff Burton, who was in the booth, was the first driver to be disqualified from an Xfinity Series race after the 1982 reincorporation of the series. That was at New River Valley Speedway. I believe it was in 92 or 91. So it goes back quite a ways in that sense there. It was much more of a recent phenomenon to have disqualifications in the Xfinity Series. I'm not sure if that's just a difference in the quality of tech inspection or what they look for, or how much is caught in pre-race inspection perhaps, but that was the scenario there. So yeah, low ride height for Noah Gragson. I'm not sure. Can you guys hear me okay on this? I haven't. It's probably a little late in the show, 49 minutes in here for a sound check, but I'm seeing the levels on here. I tried to kind of crank that up a little bit here because I was listening to an older show and it seemed like it was coming off a little too distant. So if we're having any issues there, definitely let me know. In the meantime, what I do want to talk about is some of the other great runs that we had out of some of the underdogs in the Xfinity race. Unfortunate for Landon Castle and Noah Gragson, but a big boon for a lot of drivers that were already having great runs. Brandon Brown on old tires climbed all the way to 5th at the finish. He ends up inheriting the 3rd spot in the results here. His best run since he won Talladega last year. Jeremy Clements, his best run of the year, finishing in 4th. I believe he was 6th at Darlington earlier this season. You had Kyle Weatherman, the first top 10 finish ever for Jesse Iwuji Motorsports. Best run for him, tying 2 other 8th place runs that he had, including the one for Mike Harmon Racing at Kentucky a couple years ago, and then the more recent run with, I believe it was the Mario Gosselin effort at Atlanta. Or was it Atlanta or was it Road America? It was one of those two. But again, fantastic run there for Weatherman this year. Mason Massey, he had a top 10 at Atlanta in the spring, finishes in the 9th spot there. Bailey Curry, former teammate of Kyle Weatherman over at the Mike Harmon team, now with JD Motorsports. 10th place finish for him, first top 10 since he got a top 10 for Mike Harmon last year at Phoenix. Great run for him. David Starr and Joe Graff Jr., the 2 SS Green Light entries just outside the top 10. CJ McLaughlin only once has finished 20th place. Every other time in his very few starts that he's had, he's been well back in the running order. He once swapped out of a ride that he finished last in, was finishing back in the order when David Starr took over for him at Texas. Had so many rough runs. I know it's very early in his career, but a 13th place finish is absolutely incredible for him. I know a lot of this, is partially due to some of the accidents that happened in the race, and we'll certainly talk about that too. But regardless, given how many cars were finishing, that's still definitely up in the order. Patrick Emmerling finishing in the 16th spot. It's a new career best for him. Derek Griffith running very well in 18th, just ahead of Ryan Vargas. And, again, the list certainly goes on. But beyond that, unfortunately had quite a bit of attrition in the race there. Certainly none more than that very big accident off of turn 2. Ryan Sieg was having a great race at the beginning of it, winning stage 1, being a factor in stage 2 in the 10th place finish. But unfortunately, getting caught up in that incident after Josh Berry spun out in turn 2. And just like we saw in the Cup race today, that becomes the pinch point, and you get a big pile up through there. Sieg got a very big hit from Jeb Burton, and ultimately Myatt Snyder was involved in that wreck as well. Big pile up out of there. Good to see the drivers climb out of that okay, especially Sieg and Burton in particular. But unfortunately, again, if it weren't for bad luck, Ryan Sieg would have none at all, even with CJ McLaughlin, his teammate, having a great run out there and finishing back in the order. Also, again, Ty Gibbs, dominant as ever, looked to be keeping the 54's streak of great runs going, leads 49 laps, has, of all things, a suspension issue that was discovered on a pit stop. Some shims fell out, and the thing drops back to the 21st spot there. So an unfortunate situation there for him. William Byron shouldn't have been in the field at all in that JR Motorsports Hendrick Cars entry. Ultimately has an electrical failure after he leads 22 laps and drops back into the 26th spot. The other Cup Series invader in the field was Ty Dillon, who was one of two subjects of very big news in the silly season side of things this week. Ty Dillon, of course, the announcement this week that he would not rejoin with the Petty GMS effort on the Cup Series side next year. There are rumors, but only rumors, that Noah Gragson is favored to take over for him. Of course, both of them sharing the sponsorship with the Black Rifle Coffee Company seems to be a big indicator of that. But Dillon did a decent shot of that with the sixth place finish in the number 48 car. So a good run for him, even though he's a Cup Series invader in the truest sense of the term, even without a Cup Series victory. Arguably, probably the best driver in position for a first Cup win. Him and Corey LaJoie, I think, are on the tops of most people's lists, certainly at this point. We certainly have to talk about the other big news that we had on the silly season side of this week, and that, of course, was the situation with Tyler Reddick. I was just as gobsmacked as most of you were that there was going to be an announcement that 2311 Racing was going to bring Reddick on to drive for 2311 in 2024, which still feels like ages from now. Now, obviously, as Nate Ryan and many others pointed out, this is not at all unprecedented. There have been cases where a driver team announcement has come out, but there needs to be other contracts that need to be negotiated, so it's going to be a couple years in the future. Casey Kane in his 1 year run with Red Bull, with Team Red Bull before he went over to Hendrick Motorsports. Clint Boyer in his ride with Stewart Haas Racing when he had to do that filler year with H. Scott. Those have certainly happened. I think the difference in this particular case is how surprised Richard Childress's team has been to hear this, especially just days after he got his first Cup Series win. I wonder if they were just kind of waiting for that first win to happen before they made this announcement. I think there was a lot of speculation, of course, about is this going to be a situation where he's taking one of the two drivers' spots, or is there going to be a situation where they're going to try to get a third charter? At the suggestion of somebody online, I did listen to the Denny Hamlin Dale Jr. download after this happened, and Hamlin did mention well before this announcement came out that he felt 3 was the right number of teams to have, and so that seems to be the indication that there's going to be 3 cars, and they're going to keep Kurt and Bubba Wallace. Seemed like a lot of the initial speculation was that Bubba Wallace was going to be out of the ride. I know he's had a lot of rough runs, and certainly there was some speculation about that. The more the discussion went, it sounded like it was more towards Kurt Busch and saying, well, wait a minute, he was just about to retire, and now he's back in this ride, and he just got it. But it's like, well, wait a minute, he just won this year. Again, are they really going to rush him out the door? I know it's a couple years ahead of the time, and things are going to be, I'm sure very different from that point than they are now. But it may be if Denny's sticking to his original plan with 3 entries, it sounds like that's more likely the scenario. The problem that I have with that, of course, is, once again, the charter system. So we got to go down this road again. The big issue that I have with this, of course, is, for a charter to be available, another team has to lose one. And again, this is going to just keep happening over and over again. It's a system that is built on failure. It is a system that is not built on success. It does not reward success. It punishes failure. And that's the big problem with this. Imagine in any other sport that this were the case, that, say the Atlanta Falcons have they have 3 straight years that they're worst in their division. And then, all of a sudden, their whole football team gets sold to Minneapolis or something, or some other, just some random city, and they just start a whole different team, and then they're just out of the sport. It's like, well, there's a lot of teams just wouldn't exist at all if that were the case. Obviously, in the Cup Series, the same could be argued about some other teams that we have lost over the years. Petty Enterprises, and Bud Moore Engineering and other programs in that sense. The charter system was presented to be a replacement for that, an assurance that these teams are going to have an asset that they're not going to lose, that if the worst case scenario happens, they'll have an asset they can sell, and they're not just going to have to sell just cars in a shop that are worth not much. Although, other teams have been able to make, that work as best they can. It's often a fire sale, but, they do what they can do. But it's not been any different. We still have we're still losing teams. And we still have an arbitrary system where they just gave these teams charters and said, okay, well, look, we're rewarding you for being full-time in the sport for 3 years. And then teams like Premium Motorsports or H. Scott Motorsports were somehow ranked ahead of somebody like the Wood Brothers, which was complete nonsense. So if it was, and we've gone down this road many times, but it always is going to keep coming up because it's an artificial barrier that the sport has now created for itself. What is it going to do at this point? I mean, I don't think the charter system should be there, but are they really going to invalidate, these charters and say that suddenly this asset isn't worth anything? Not really sure. I think the big teams probably won't care because they're not going anywhere. I mean, Gibbs and Hendrick and so forth. But the teams that are kind of on the chopping block, yeah, they're probably going to object more about it. Maybe a team like BJ McLeod or a team like Rick Ware's team or, these other ones there. I just think that I don't, it's distasteful that instead of just having teams succeed or fail just as naturally as they always have, and have, there's going to be some kind of turnover one way or the other, and teams try to figure out the best business model that can make things work, try to hire the best drivers they can that could be as competitive as they can. Instead, we've created this little bubble. Things aren't going to get any bigger than that. There's only going to be 36 charters because just like Denny Hamlin said on the Dale Jr. Download, it's like, well, we're not going to have a 37th charter because now everybody else's charter is worth less, and we're not going to get as much money as these guys. And it's like, why create that? Why create that situation? It's absurd. Why is that any better of an assurance than having the top 35 rule, for example, which I wasn't crazy about? I mean, that seems lenient these days because at least now you have a shot where you can start a new team, try to position yourself ahead of these other guys, and maybe get some Boffo qualifying setups to make sure you start some of these races. But you now created the situation where it's stymied growth. You're preventing outside teams from coming in. You're preventing teams from coming in that are all locked and loaded and ready to go. And Dale Jr. was right to mention this right off the bat. That I'm sure he clearly has indications of trying to get JR Motorsports into the Cup Series. And but it's again, they've created this little box in their zealousness of chasing ghosts, and it's like, oh my goodness, we can't have start and park teams in the sport. Oh, that would be terrible. We can't have all these people out here that just get money for nothing. It's like, well, you want to encourage other teams to get in there, and then they out-qualify those guys, and then those guys aren't in the field. That's systems in place. If you want to start a team, especially nowadays where you could buy these cars as like a Lego set and put them together and enter them in the field. Now you got all these other things. You made it easier to get cars, but you made it harder for them to start a team. So where does that work out? But it's hilarious to me in a tragic way, honestly, that these big teams are now finally starting to realize this. That they've realized, oh, wait a minute, we signed a deal with the devil here back in 2016. Now we're screwed. It's like, yeah. Well, wonder why the Xfinity series is doing so well. You got a lot of these new investors and people who want to start these teams. You think when Emmett Smith came in and he wanted to start a program, he was looking at the Cup Series? I'm sure he wanted to get there. But, working with Jesse Iwuji, they're like, okay, well, look, this is the only series that this can work. This is the highest series in NASCAR that we can work this out and get him in there. And that's what they did. And I'm sure it's the same thing for these others. It's also the only series, along with the Truck Series, that you get real underdogs there, like your Norm Bennings, like your Jennifer Jo Cobbs, teams of that nature, Mike Harmon's team, that are still able to at least, have a shot at actually trying to compete in there, and then try to string together enough runs to get in like the top 30 in points and try to get a different tier in the purse structure. You just don't have it in the Cup Series, and it's unfortunate. And I get it's an elite series, and you want to have like the best and the best, but I don't think making it any harder to get in there was the way to do it. And but unfortunately, these guys are just going to kind of, they're going to bang their head against the wall at the same time, and it's only going to get worse. I hate to say it because again, and that is the most tragic part of it is that, again, it's not a system that's rewards success. It's not a system that encourages people to come in and join us. It's like, oh, we want celebrity owners. We want new people in there. It's like, no, what you want is you want these other people out of it so you can bring other people into it. You want these people to fail so your team can come in there. And, again, and maybe this is the way, bring this back around to the 2311 thing. This is probably the nature of how these announcements are going to go in the Cup Series. I'm worried that this is the way it's going to set up. That now it's like a level of like 4D chess, and they got to kind of work their way ahead. and, say, well, wait a minute, this is going to be, we need to have a charter in order to, compete. Of course, we're not going to just enter a car. I'm sure Denny Hamlin's not going to enter a third car and just have it be an open team. And, NASCAR's going to be only too happy, I'm sure, to kind of help them get a charter from another program. I'm sure they're not happy about, there's some owners they probably don't want in the series, and there's owners they do want in the series. I mean, when I talk with the folks over at the Starcom Racing, they told me just as much, and I believe them. I didn't used to think that there was like a thing where there was kind of an agenda that the sport had one way or the other. But after talking with some of these other team owners, after doing the JD McDuffie book and hearing about, officials getting in the way of Old Blue and keeping them from coming in there, it's been a long-term thing, and maybe they haven't had as many, mechanisms in place to keep people out, or just to only bring in the people they want. But that's where we find ourselves now, and it's sad that they've now created a situation where it's so good at keeping people out that they're keeping out other people they want to bring in. It's awful. It's awful, and it would be great if there was a way to just award another charter. Like if somebody's good in the Xfinity and Truck Series, if they win the championship, maybe they get to bid on one at a lower price. But in their infinite wisdom, they decided to create a system where it's just open the free market. It could cost $1 million this year. It could cost $10 million next year, and there's no oversight. Well, how is that any different from starting a team? I mean, it's stupid. So it's, they've so mangled the payment structure and the process for getting into the Cup Series that you're probably going to see. I think we're going to see some more good years out of especially the Xfinity Series. I think the depth of that series, of the talent that's there, I think that's fantastic, and I think it's all the more galling when you have the Cup Series guys get in there, because they really don't need them. I mean, if you're already having guys getting squeezed out of the Cup Series, you're getting your Cup Series talent in the Xfinity Series already. Ty Dillon may end up in there next year after, what's going on with the Petty GMS deal. Could just as easily happen to any of the other competitors if there's only 36 spots. Could be the same thing with BJ McLeod. Who knows? But it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. It is very much a glass ceiling they've created here. And, I don't know. And I think it'll happen in plain sight, and it's just not going to be looked at as much. And I get where Denny Hamlin's coming from on his side of it there, but they should have seen this coming. I just think it's ridiculous, and it's sad. I don't like it when I would have loved to be wrong about this. I would have loved it if they just figured it out, and maybe it's like, oh, it's great, because it's a shame, because at the same time, in other ways, I think the Cup Series is doing very well. I think they have brought in some new fans. I think they've brought in some new teams, but you gotta have some kind of way to loosen things up a little bit and get people still excited about new teams coming in without being like, oh, wait a minute, where'd these guys go? Just have it go back to qualifying meaning something. Have it go back to the preseason meaning something, and team announcements, and just saying like, look, we want to see if we're going to be a good challenger and getting up there and being able to compete with these guys. And maybe it doesn't work. Maybe we only run 2 years and then the team closes, or we merge with somebody else and we get back up there. You just don't have that, because and I don't know. So I hope that. I hope it works out. I mean, it's exciting for Tyler Reddick and getting the 2311 ride. I just think that for the traditional perception of silly season and trying to kind of develop programs that way, I just think that it just shows how restrained it is, and I think it's so artificial, and it's created this entirely different thing, and it was all based on, again, like I said earlier, chasing ghosts. What possible threat did start and park teams have to the value of top teams? None. They weren't going to win the race. They're not going to keep you from winning the race. You win the race, you get the most money. Last place is never going to get more money than winning the race. What was the threat? It's never going to get more points than winning the race. And in a playoff system, they weren't going to make the playoffs. So why does that cheapen the value of it? And that question never seemed to be asked, and not enough people cared. And they just ramrodded it through. They're like, oh no, look, if you only care about the top teams, you probably think there's no problem at all. But the canary in the coal mine's always been the small teams back there, and they're the ones that have to die for another team to live. And It used to be that they could coexist and at least have a chance to try to qualify into the field. And if the team collapsed and they closed, so be it. It was based on performance. Now it's just based on just bad luck. It's just like, we don't want you in here, and we want this guy in. Get out. And I think that's so antithetical to the spirit of stock car racing that it's repulsive, and I don't like it. And that's why I've actually kind of become more of a fan of the Xfinity series, really, in the last few years, even than the Cup series. I think, again, this year at Sears Point is probably the first time I followed the Truck series, much more than the Cup series, but it just kind of worked out that way. Um, and there's, it's not to say it's perfect there either. They got things they're working on, but that's a whole other situation. So, yeah. Yeah, F Mecca, you're bringing up Ty Dillon missing the Daytona 500. Yeah, imagine if we just had more starting spots, and then Ty Dillon and the team that beat him would both be in the show. What's the problem with that? It was never asked, why do we have to shorten the fields? Why 36 cars? Why these 36 cars? But again, it was all a means to flush out the teams they didn't want in there and bring the teams they wanted in there, but no more than this amount. And if it's more teams than that, then oh well. But it's unfortunate. So anyway, let me get off my soapbox here. I see a couple super chats in here. Let me make sure I get these here for you guys. Beast of Metal, my goodness, thank you so much on the super chat here. I don't know if you saw the NBC Sports Friday 5 article where several drivers said the hits felt harder this year, but it seems to back up my theory regarding NASCAR rushing forward without fully understanding the next-gen physics. I have not read that article, Beast of Metal, but thank you for bringing it up. I'm going to definitely have to check that out because that is troubling. I think there was somebody that was bringing up a discussion where Austin Dillon and another driver were discussing, I think it was Ryan Blaney, were discussing the hits you take in these cars and how hard they've been for the drivers. I think that's definitely something to really kind of talk about. But I do think that it's been very much an experiment with this car. I mean, they did a little bit of testing, but I don't think they did nearly enough in terms of racing these cars or so forth. I think maybe if they just did more exhibition races to start the season, probably would have been a good idea to maybe kind of brush that up and see how these cars run actually under race conditions. That probably would have been a bad idea if they could clear up issues like with the lug nuts and so forth. I think that was probably the one drawback to the Busch Clash was that it had so many more unknowns on top of the car itself that you couldn't take the time to worry about pit stops, because of course you couldn't do live pit stops with the track being as small as it was. They had to do that elsewhere. You couldn't figure out the mechanics of the car because you weren't really testing it to the limits. You couldn't get the RPMs high enough to run it at that track. Really, you had to use the regular season as your test session. You had to start at Daytona and just figure all this out. So, of course, you had loose wheels, you had rim failures, and you had hard hits that, yeah, these drivers, I guess, were really taking, and it's unfortunate. I think, yeah, they probably should have they should have recognized how big of a departure this was and probably started the year off with maybe a preseason Thunder thing. Do a few races at maybe other tracks and invite fans and sell tickets that way and say, this is going to be our big rollout. I think it was well-meaning to do the Clash and do such a way over-the-top venue at a completely different track. I think it was exciting to be there. It was exciting to see fans excited to be there. And all that. But I think that probably would have been a better approach. Maybe something like what the Truck Series did when they started off, that they had a few exhibition races before their actual start of the season to actually test this equipment under race conditions rather than just doing practice and testing. I think that's something that should have been looked at more. In terms of the wrecks, I mean, again, I think a lot of that has been, I mean, I don't know how well you can test that, but that would be something else to kind of look at there too. But now that we're at this point, unfortunately, I think NASCAR really is just treating the rest of the season, as a test session. Whether it's figuring out how to make that toe link stronger, whether it is, the air circulation in the cars, or as you're mentioning, yeah, I mean, how it responds to these accidents. I think that's something that, they could have looked at. Or, thank you for mentioning that. Is it Chief Uder on that one? I'm sorry, it's small on the screen here. They could have done something like an 07. Yeah, just done the short tracks. Exactly. They could have phased it in that way. And that would have been acceptable, really kind of do that. I think that would have been something else to really look at there too. yeah, if they didn't want to do exhibitions, you just do it during the season. Yeah, maybe start it at Bristol and, kind of do it just well, maybe not the Bristol Dirt Race this year, but other venues like Martinsville, maybe the road courses, and kind of try that out. I'm not sure how many of the teams wanted to run both cars because I think that's kind of a hidden thing from the 2007 season that made that year so challenging. Even when you had a lot of teams that started off that year that really wanted to jump in with both feet. Your team Red Bull, second entry for Tommy Baldwin's team, or not Tommy Baldwin's, Bill Davis Racing's team back then when Jeremy Mayfield ran for him. That could be something else to kind of look at. But yeah, I think that's yeah. I mean that ship may have already sailed, but maybe that's something else that they can kind of look at and figure out from there. But yes, thank you for the super chat on that for sure. Let me get this one here too. Thank you. Oh goodness, man, you don't have to. If you don't have to send this many, but thank you so much. This other one here, post race ride height is a farce and continuing to enforce in the lower series. This is from Beast of Metal, of course. Is just a way to neutralize underdog drivers and teams. Prove me wrong. Well, to be fair, it seems like it's catching a lot of these big teams as well. Joe Gibbs Racing has run afoul of this before. JR Motorsports too. It's unfortunate that it caught Colleague Racing too, although Colleague Racing has kind of become a bit of a crime syndicate itself with how dominant they've been in some of these races in particular. Old AJ Allmendinger is just, batting 1,000 out there. Maybe not as much this season compared to last season, but well, I guess, this season's been just a bit different in that sense. Yeah, I mean, it's unfortunate. I think a post-race inspection in general, is kind of a problem. When I think of post-race ride hype, I think of that Daytona testing where Martin Truex had a roof cam. I'm sure I mentioned this before, but it still cracks me up. Martin Truex had a roof camera on his car at Daytona, and they were doing the opening testing, and they kind of brought him in there, and they brought him in, and this is back when they didn't do the laser inspection. They had that big cage, and they dropped this cage down, and they had a roof rail thing. And so the camera is showing this, and you see the roof rail thing come down, and it's coming down, and then it like stops here. And you got this big gap between where it's supposed to be and where the roof of the car is. And then like they kind of cut away from it, and then about an hour later they say, "Oh yeah, Truex, he failed inspection. We don't know why." It's like, well, maybe the car was a little too low. Yeah, I mean, I think as long as they're testing as other drivers, and maybe if they're seeing that more cars in the field are settling down and they drop down a bit of height. I'm sure that just naturally happens when the equipment is kind of wore out, and the shocks don't rebound as quick or whatever the situation is. I'm not the most technically minded of all people on this, but I assume if it's anything like driving your passenger car, things kind of wear out. And the more it wears out, the more the car is kind of dragging on the track. I think if there's some latitude they're working with, and seeing big teams or small teams having that struggle, hopefully it would be kind of viewed in that perception. They don't just punish any drop at all from the start of the race to the end. Because the other issue is you don't want to have a situation where the big teams are able to get away with this because they found some really discreet way of making the car pass inspection and do that. So that would be another one to kind of look at too. So I'm not sure if that'll work out, but it's a good thing to bring up. I think it's worth looking at to see that it's not affecting small teams too much. I do remember Motorsports Business Management had this happen with Chad Fincham, and here's an organization that, look, they're really not trying to slide anything past anybody. They're just looking to qualify for the race and try to get the best run they can. But they got caught by one of these, and it was unfortunate. So, it does seem to catch them up. And if there is a situation where it's more biased their direction, yeah, it should be looked at. I'm not sure if it's that clearly obvious, but that would be another thing to kind of look at too. So there's that. Michael Jensen, thank you for your super chat as well. Hi, Brock, just joined in. Have you touched on the double DQ and when the last time there were 2 DQs in the race? Yes, I have talked about that a little bit earlier here. You can definitely check that out on the show here. But yes, I did talk about the last time we had 2 DNQs, or not 2 DNQs, 2 DQs, disqualifications, being in either the 2017 race 1 of the duels, when you had 2 in that race, or back in 1960 with a weird pit road entrance and the 6 cars disqualified from that one. I did mention that one. So, but yeah, we got a bit of a discussion in that one there a little bit earlier. Very unusual. Definitely added some time, about another hour, to writing the article yesterday afternoon. Pending post-race inspection from today, we'll see what's going on here in New Hampshire. I don't think I've seen anything in the chat yet on that. So we'll see what we got here. Nope. Yes, we do. 45 seconds ago, Bob Pockris, no issues in Cup Tech. Bell is the winner. Those are the words here from Bob Pockris. We do have a call. No issues in tech inspection. Christopher Bell does have his second career Cup Series win. And the last place finish for BJ McLeod, his fourth of the season, is now assured. So that'll be the article for you guys later tonight. Confirmation 07, thank you for joining me, man. Payne, I thought you'd be happy today. I thought you'd be happy with the third place run for Bubba Wallace. He looked fantastic out there today. Confirmation 07 and I met up in person over at the Clash earlier this year. So it's unfortunate that, again, he didn't pull off the win, but there's a lot of people online saying, again, we talked about this kind of at the earlier part of the show. That was one of the most, one of the career runs that Bubba Wallace has had in his Cup career, between that and the Kansas race. So again, thank you for the super chat. But again, I think, there's something to definitely be positive about. Although I guess if you're looking at the pit crew, Wallace's pit crew went to victory lane today with Christopher Bell. Although you notice there was that one moment, we didn't talk about this in the show here, but they did have that wheel that almost that came off, and they had to kind of pull a Kurt Busch to make sure he didn't, leave with the wheel loose again, just like in Atlanta, and still overcame that. Again, not sure what's going on there, but Bubba Wallace's drive along with the the pit crew there, I think that's definitely something positive to look at there. But that was definitely another one to look at. F Mecca, seeing your comment there about people jumping on the roof in victory lane, causing your car to fail inspection. I remember, back then, or they had that stupid plastic thing. They did like a set of PVC tubing, and they set up like a rack where somebody's job was actually to drop that over the driver's window. So when the driver climbed out, he wouldn't jump on the roof because this thing was in the way. That was the stupidest thing ever. If you really want to do a throwback weekend at Darlington, you can do something stupid like that, like put all the junk on the roof of the car and then put that thing over the window. I mean, there's kind of a throwback right there. So I definitely remember that for sure. Goodness. So if Blaney is regular season champ, only one more winner to get in. We're getting down to that. It's still Blaney and Truex in the last two winless spots, isn't it? I mean, Blaney's looking really good this year. Not so much today with the spin that he had. Where was he in the results? Did he recover from that? I don't believe I mentioned him in the top 10. We were going over that earlier. No, he was one lap down and 18th in the results here. Now official with the clearing of inspection. So we got that. So again, I think only two guys from Bubba's crew switched to Bell. Only two guys. I thought it was the whole team. Was it different on that? Okay. That's news to me. I thought I must have heard it wrong then. Okay. Well, still, again, different kind of situation with from that. But still, a couple of his crew members in victory lanes. He got that. But it seems like there's something else. Hopefully we'll find out. I mean, a 300-mile race, pit strategy is so critical because you're going to have so few pit stops that you really can't afford to screw up, which is why I think it was so surprising that Kyle Busch came back from all the problems he had in this race. The fact that Bubba Wallace, again, with having to have a bit of a change on pit road and still getting that good run out there, certainly speaks to, the team and, of course, the drive out there to kind of get that run. So, again, hopefully your guy gets a good run coming up. He can always, try to punch his ticket here. But I mean, now at this point, man, even if he gets a win, he's going to really have to fight for it to get up there in points. But it's going to be interesting to see what happens. But it'll be interesting to see. Alrighty. Well, let's see. We're going to get down to our trivia section here. So now we've talked about the Cup and Xfinity race. If you have anything else, let me check my list here as well. Make sure there's anything else that I haven't missed from our discussion here this week. We talked about the one on there. We talked about Ty Dillon. Let's see. Certainly condolences to the family of Bobby East. The news about that earlier this week with what happened at the gas station in Los Angeles there. Lost his life the other day. So condolences to his family and fans as well. Definitely getting some more traffic on that earlier this week. We talked about 2311. Also want to certainly. Oh, on the I don't think I mentioned this on last week's show. We talked about a little bit more JD McDuffie news here with the um, some upcoming news on this side. So the original plan was to do some coverage over at the Darlington race later this year in anticipation of the mural unveiling, which is coming up on Labor Day weekend in downtown Sanford. Unfortunately, I won't be able to make it out for that. We're kind of, again, gas prices and everything else. We're kind of scaling things back and just stuff on the West Coast here. So unfortunately, I won't be out at the mural unveiling this September. However, I do hopefully, things kind of loosen up here. We do plan on making another trip out that direction and certainly go to see that because I think it looks beautiful. I think they did a great job with the local artists out there showing, J.D. McDuffie's career, honoring both him and his pit crew on the side of a brick building in downtown Sanford. Again, going to be unveiled this September. I do have the J.D. McDuffie book re-release there, which is still available on Amazon, and the Derek Cope book still in the works here as well. But the McDuffie family is still raising funds for the mural. Check out JAM Screen Printing. That's JAM Screen Printing. They're currently reissuing a lot of the classic J.D. McDuffie shirts, as well as their most recent one is they're reissuing the ones Dale Jr. wore on his podcast back in 2018. We were just finishing up the Watkins Glen book tour, the one with the blue car at the front and JD's name over the top of it there. They've re-released that one with both the blue car as well as the version with the red car on it there. I've ordered both of those, so hopefully I'll be wearing those on one of these shows here coming up. Fly the colors for those guys, but we're certainly pulling for them there. It looks like they're getting work started on that. They got the primer already started on the building and getting that going, so it's very exciting to see that come together. Sad I'm not going to be able to be over there for that. I'm hoping to do something to kind of tie in with that coming up here more remotely. But definitely would like to be involved in that somehow because I think it's a tremendous effort the family has put together to certainly honor JD's life there at the same time. So we got that coming up. Our next coverage is still planned for Las Vegas, which is going to be in October, week after my birthday. So we're going to be heading out for that and then doing the championship weekend in Phoenix. This, of course, conditioned on, we'll see how credentials and everything go on that end. But I think we're pretty good on that so far there. Last Bro is actually going to be on Rattlesnake Hill for the championship race this year. So it'll be a little bit of a different view here that we usually have where he's kind of doing the fan side of things and I'm doing the media side of it. So that'll be something else to certainly look at here at the same time. One other thing I don't think we talked about, I had this note left over from last week. There's been a lot more discussion about the Chicago street course, where I guess there was news that folks in Chicago were actually talking about this already being something that was in the works for a couple of years. Haven't heard anything from NASCAR or nothing else from people that I talked to on this. And I know a lot of people are weighing the options of like running races there versus running races on the Chicagoland Speedway that's been off the circuit a couple of years, or the idea of street racing in general. I think NASCAR at this point is looking at their Cup Series cars and really thinking about like, okay, what we've created cars that are close to, something that can navigate, really good road courses. I thought they put on a fine show at Sears Point and COTA and these other events here. And I guess they're just wanting to test the limits of it. I think the problem is at the same time is these cars seem to really struggle with flat tracks. Not so much today, but certainly I think it should be a little bit concerning of the show that we had back at Martinsville back in the spring, that there's more that they need to work on. Also the fragility of these cars too. I'm not sure how good of a show they would put on at a street course. I'm not sure why Chicago is such an alluring destination for one. I figured that maybe they would use that as an opportunity to go to a region that maybe doesn't have any races, kind of like the Northwest, for example. They used to have a street course race in Tacoma, Washington, which is one of the races that Derek Cope raced in back in his earlier part of his career. I figured if there was going to be a throwback at all, it maybe be something to that. That was more of a West Series race. It wasn't a Winston Cup race. But something of that nature would be something else to look at there, too. I'm kind of apathetic about it. I'm not sure exactly how that would work. I think the garage area would be kind of interesting, I guess, for that. The last place battle might be good. But I'm not sure about how good of a race it would be. I think especially given how good this car seems to be performing at mile and a halves, I think that bringing Chicagoland back would probably be a higher priority. So I don't know what's happening on that, but hopefully we'll have something that comes up there at the same time. So we'll be seeing that. Said Head too. I saw your question about the audio book on this. So yes, I am planning on doing an audio book for the Derek Cope book. I am planning on narrating it myself. So those of you who are looking ahead to that, that is definitely in the works. I'm still working on getting the cover illustration set up for the Derek Cope book. At that point, I'm going to submit it over to the editor, and we're going to get that thing ready for printing. I want to get it in print, I want to get it in ebook, and I want to get it in audiobook. So I'm going to plan on working all three of those. What'll probably end up happening is I'm hoping to get that book released. I'd love to get it released by the holidays. That would be great. I don't lock that in yet, but that's kind of what I'm looking at. I think realistically, that's probably the timetable. And then I'm going to probably use the off season to get the audiobook done and get that recorded and get that up before the start of next season. That would be ideal. That's kind of what our goal is at this point here. What I am working on between now and our next coverage in October, I do have some other news on that front. I was very pleased to announce on Friday that I have completed an interview with Stanton Barrett. So big thanks to him on that. He was very nice. We had a great discussion, about half an hour on Friday afternoon. Was able to kind of talk with him on that. He also offered, if I had any follow-up questions, to go ahead and text him. He even offered to look over the script, which I think is great. He said, like, look, I got no problem with using the audio. Just make sure that things are described accurately. I was like, look, I got no problem showing you the script. You want to take a look at that? I didn't want to impose, but he was absolutely on board with that. So I think that'll make it even better. Because I do want to kind of have it be a story very much about his own career, his father's career, and certainly tying in the connections with the field fillers in 2004. He actually had kind of a very good discussion on that, especially when I brought up some of the other drivers I talked with. A little bit of a teaser on that. I did ask him about what Carl Long mentioned in his interview, where he said that he gave Stanton Barrett a hard time about the Pocono race in 2004, where Carl was last car out and he bumped him out of the field. And Stanton was very kind of quiet on that when he says, "Yeah, I remember that. He cost me a lot of money." So that was certainly one of the battles there between a couple of the field fillers back then. So that script is still in the works. One thing I was working on just last night is getting the transcript for that tied up. So getting that kind of brushed up so I could merge it into the script. I have another interview that I completed with another member of his crew earlier this year. So I'm going to put that into the script. And also Brian Hallman, our good buddy over there at the BRH Racing Archives, provided some excellent material about not just Stanton Barrett, but also the other field fillers, bringing that in there too. So the good news is there's a script that I've already been working on this whole time, and I'm now just kind of adding this other information in there to kind of tie all that together. I don't anticipate that taking too long. I think within the week we'll start recording on that and getting that video done, and I'm very excited to get that set up. So the goal right now is to get that video done. I have another 2 scripts that I've been working on since we've been waiting to get the Barrett interview done. So it's been a very productive year. I know it doesn't seem like it with a lot of the produced content on this channel, but we're hoping to get some more information on that too, and get those videos up for you guys. So that's going to be kind of the goal between now and October. I don't think it's going to take till October to get these videos up, but that's kind of the long end there with that. So I'm hoping really August, I think, will probably be the time for the Stanton Barrett one up there, and we'll set things up at that point too. So very excited. It's been a very productive week, and I think it's going to be a lot of fun here too. So definitely look forward to some more content on the channel here coming up there. So between that and the Cope book and everything else, it'll feel great to finally get some stuff off the table here and make the way for some other projects that I've been meaning to kind of catch up on there as well. So you guys can look forward to that too. So we'll go ahead and jump into our trivia segment here. I saw a couple super chats here. We'll jump onto those as well. While I do that, I'll have you guys pick your favorite category for our late 90s Trivial Pursuit deal here as we wrap up the show for the evening. Categories again are NASCAR, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. Whichever categories you guys would like here on this. Again, NASCAR is the first category, pits, teams, tracks, drivers, and the wild card. So whichever category you'd like, go ahead and add that on here, and we'll definitely go into that. So if you guys have any other questions for the weekend or anything else you'd like to go over We'll definitely talk about that too. Said Head 2, thank you for your super chat on here for sure. I don't know about you, but I'm craving lobster for sure. Absolutely. I guess you're excited about Christopher Bell with the win, and now official, certainly in with the results of post-race inspection. That is the story there. I guess for show and tell, I can show you. Yeah, I got my Corey LaJoie dustless blasting shirt. I guess we got that. I think I've worn this on the show before, but you got that design there. Certainly after the run he had last week, I wanted to kind of bring this out for the show this time around here. Unfortunately, Corey had a bit of struggles today there with a weird transmission issue that put him into the fence. But yeah, flying the colors for BK Racing, one of the teams that did have charters that unfortunately is no longer with us. So there's another part of the puzzle there for you guys there as well. But yeah, definitely have that still on the show here today. Alrighty, I'm seeing 3, 4 for the wild card. Wild card seems to be leading, I think, here. I see 3 for drivers. I see a couple for pits. Remember that Simpsons episode where Homer gets a pet lobster? I'm trying to remember on that one. Is that a more recent one? I just been watching some of the Real Gyms videos on YouTube. Last Bro's a big fan of those. I don't remember what season that was. But I didn't. I kind of fell off The Simpsons a bit. For me, it was more like around 2002, 2003 when I was in college. I didn't really watch it as often, but watched it like religiously before that. That's for sure. Sundays at 8 o'clock were times that were reserved for only one thing. It was fun. Appointment television was fun. I know it feels like a foreign concept these days with YouTube and everything being the way it is, but yeah, it was older. Okay. We'll probably do wild card. I think that's the head. I think it's the headliner here. I had it on this section here. I think I slipped right by it. Here we go. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. So, first question here for tonight. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with Pearson? I assume it means David Pearson. So let me read that one again. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with David Pearson? Yeah, there's the question there. What happens if there are more winners and playoff spots? I would assume it just goes to it would go to points on that one. That's my understanding. So like whoever's higher ranked in points, because you want to get the top 16 winners, I would assume. So if you have 17 winners and you look at all of them ranked in the overall standings, and one of them's like 23rd, then yeah, I imagine that's gonna be the one that's gonna get bumped out. That'd be my understanding. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with David Pearson? Is the question. Alrighty. Yes, we do have the categories here. Bobby Allison, Firewall Roberts, Charlie Glotzback, Bobby Isaac, Cale Yarborough, Usain Bolt. Yeah, there you go. We'll see. Want to say Petty, but that may be too obvious, so I'll say Yarborough. Sadio Mane. Let's see. That's right. They were doing like the track and field review there today. Was that why Rick Allen was there? I know somebody mentioned that maybe he was doing a track and field thing. I know he has history with that as a competitor, but that makes sense. Who ran a quarter-mile track on foot in under 60 seconds to win a bet with David Pearson? The answer is Jim Hunter. Jim Hunter. Wow, didn't think it'd be one of the officials, huh? Jim Hunter is the correct answer. I don't think anybody got that. Talk about a wild card question to kick it off tonight. Tiebreakers is number of wins, then numbers of wins, then points. That makes sense, because then all the ones at the bottom would be one-time winners, I would imagine. I mean, you're not going to eliminate somebody that's won 5 races if, everybody's won 1 race. Yeah, so anyone back of 15th or so should be worried if Truex, Blaney, and Harvick all win. Yeah, which is certainly possible. We got tracks coming up that all 3 of them are pretty good at. Yeah, I mean Pocono could be a real. I don't know. I don't know. Carl Lewis, Jesse Owens. Yeah, we got great track and field names. Or I guess more Jesse Owens on that one. So there you go. Yeah, nobody got that one. All right, next question. Whoop, I was asking it again. Do 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 do. What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? Here's our next question. Yeah, Cindric on down can't afford a bad race. Exactly. Yeah, so you can see why Cindric was fighting to stay on the lead lap in the race today. What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? Yeah, Diffie was at Lime Rock. So was Parker Kligerman, though. You know, as Kligerman did Lime Rock, and he was at the race today. So I don't know if there's a difference in terms of people going from one direction to the other. Am I a soccer fan, Alex? Nope, I'm afraid not. That's just kind of what it looked like. It was, they say Sadio Mane? It just sounds cool. It rolls off the tongue better. If it were a driver, I'd think the same thing. Yeah, but I'm afraid no. I have no background in stock car in soccer playing. What almost that was a Freudian slip already. What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? That is our next question. We got answers for Rowan and Earl and Ralph and Richard and PJ and Pedro and Rufus and Ukopeka. Wow, that sounds like a different version of Night Before Christmas. All right, here we go. What real first name did Parnelli Jones choose not to use while driving? The answer is indeed Rufus. Maserati 9 got it. No, Alex Luft, you got it first. There you go. Rufus. Rufus was got by Alex Luft and Maserati 9. There you go. And DeBrockest. There you go. Or DeBrocast. There you go. Alrighty. Next question. What is depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? You have to kind of figure out the year from this question. What is depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? Parker would be a threat if he was full time. Well, certainly after that run at Mid-Ohio. Kudos to them for finally getting some merch over at the Henderson Motorsports team. I think that's great for them. If you don't know that Kligerman, I guess Harris Lou was working on it, and posted a great design that they had there to celebrate that win at Mid-Ohio last week. I think that was fantastic. So good commemoration of a very clean and well raced event there at Mid-Ohio. So that was good to see. What is depicted in the glass bust atop the Hooters 500 trophy? That is the question. All right, we got guesses for a hot wing, an owl, Hooters, an owl, Hooters owl, an owl that looks suspiciously like a bust, eagle. The answer is, indeed, an owl. An owl is the correct answer. Who, indeed. There you go. Somebody's got you got the, Jonathan, there you go, man. You got the owl emojis right on. All right, a couple more questions here for tonight. Let's see. What famed mechanic got his nickname riding a motorcycle, easier for me to say, burning too much oil? A motorcycle. I was thinking like a coffee motorcycle, I guess. What famed mechanic got his nickname riding a motorcycle burning too much oil? Yeah, there we go. We got nicknames now. On to the next question. It's in the logo, for crying out loud. Well, yeah, but it's one of those who's buried in Grant's tomb questions. I guess it's there just to see if you're paying attention. So yeah, but clearly you guys are. What famed mechanic got his nickname riding a motorcycle burning too much oil? Seeing several Smoky Eunuchs. I got one Fatback McSwain. Got more Smoky Eunuchs. And the answer is indeed Smoky Eunuch. Smoky Eunuch is the correct answer. Alrighty. Okay, here we go. Last question for the evening. And it's another Smoky Eunuch question. So it'll be a good way to kind of wrap things up for this evening's show. What did Smoky Eunuch crush and return when Chevy requested 15/16 parts back? So let me read that question again. It's a little confusing. What did Smoky Eunuch crush and return when Chevy requested 15/16 parts back? And 15/16 is in quotes. What did Smoky Eunuch crush and return when Chevy requested 15/16 parts back? What did he crush and return? What did Smoky Eunuch crush and return when Chevy requested 15/16 parts back? All right, I'll let you guys get a little more time to get this question in. Last one of the evening. Car, his engine, a Chevelle, brake, an entire car, Hudson Hornet, probably an engine block, 427 engine, cylinder head. Okay, good. We got a good even distribution of question answers here for this one. I think it was the front bumper, his contract with General Motors. Could be anything. I'll read it one more time for those just coming in here at the end of the show. What did Smoky Eunuch crush and return when Chevy requested 15/16 parts back? Car body, engine, or part of an engine? Okay. Here we go. Let's get the answer. The answer to this question: what did Smoky Eunuch crush and return when Chevy requested 15/16 parts back? The answer is quite literally the whole car. The whole car. So anybody got car or the whole car or the Chevelle? You guys got that one there. So Kevin Love, looks like you were the first one on that. Alexander Green, you said the entire car. So there you go. That is absolutely correct. So thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in here tonight. Congratulations again to Christopher Bell, your winner today in New Hampshire. BJ McLeod now has 4 last place finishes and a commanding 2-finish lead heading into Pocono next week. Next week will also be Todd Bodine's 800th and final NASCAR start at Pocono. I do have a LastCar.info retro infographic like I did a couple years ago for that race, so look forward to that. Those of you in the Patreon have seen that already, which is patreon.com/LastCarOnBrock. I also have some new bumper stickers back in store at the eBay link that can be found over at the website as well. We got more of the Last Happens and the Rise of the Field filler stickers that seem to be the most popular there, so those are currently available at the site. LastCar.info is the website. At LastCarOnBrock is the Twitter feed. Our next show will be after the Pocono triple header at Pocono with the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series will be on Sunday afternoon after the show, weather permitting, as it's always unpredictable there in Pennsylvania, so we'll find out from there, and we'll see if we're going to get a, 15th different winner here, or is it going to be somebody else that's going to pad their stats before the regrouping? Well, we're just a few days from finding out. So stay tuned for our preview article that'll be summing up the Truck Series, Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series for this week, and of course next week's show on Sunday. So in the meantime, have a great week, everyone. Stay safe out there, and we will see you next time.